Voilà, ciao Francesco.
Ciao Luca.
Ciao, tanto piacere, virtuale.
Molto piacere.
Altrettanto. Okay, I think the others are also there. Hadi? Yeah, I see you. Ciao Hadi.
Hello.
Lovely to see you.
Ciao, how are you?
Good, and you?
Nice to see you too.
Likewise. Alessandro, Matilde, good morning, everyone. Ciao.
Oh.
Okay, can you hear us? Yes? Good. Okay, we thank you guys for taking part to this, for spending your lunchtime with us. Steffi, it's not here, unfortunately. She sends you her greetings. And it's the 17th edition of this series of talks we are organizing through the summer. And today we have a 4 session. That's going to be a long one, let's say, so I must be short. I will introduce you very quickly in the order you will talk. So Alessandro from ABACO Lab will be the first.
Hello, guys.
Yeah, ciao Ale. And then Matilde will talk as a second, Matilde Everaert. Then Francesco from NM3 and Hadi Madwar will conclude the session. So I formally, let's say, start to introduce Alessandro and Alice, who are ABACO. These guys, they established their practice in Paris in 2015. And they are investigating architecture and design in the large variety of nuances that this beautiful job can offer to us. They run an office, they make workshops as well, write books experimenting new technologies and materials through their products, small, large, whatever they are. We have been intrigued very much by one of their recent work, whose name Cielo and Bois, which is a house that deals very much with contemporary issues and clever constructive methods and solutions. We invite you to check it out. Nevertheless, they will be part of our FakeAuthentic exhibition in September at the Gallery of Antonia Iannone with their piece Ceci n'est pas un supermarché, a built ground that positions itself in between seats and a kind of a massive topography we are all looking forward to explore. So I leave it to you, Alessandro. I thank you and very welcome.
Hello, guys. First of all, thanks for the nice introduction and for the invitation. I have to say that this such of a format is a bit unusual for us. Today I'm alone. Alice is working. She cannot be here. Yeah, I was saying about the format, which is a bit unusual, but which is the reason why actually we found it very stimulating, and it was cool to debrief with Alice about these words, because words I'm talking about fake, authentic, iconic, ironic. These are big words. I mean that it's so easy to fall into philosophy, for instance. And it's so difficult to make categories out of these words because the boundaries are so, in a way, unstable. And it's also fascinating to see how everyone of us are architect, designer, artists. So it's very interesting to see how everyone was make different interpretations and with these projects, with images, with other architects and with other thoughts. So it's so cool to be here and to participate in this sort of experiment. I think I'm gonna share my screen.
Thank you.
Okay. Can you see the screen, guys?
Yes, perfectly.
Okay. I'm gonna start with the first word, which is fake, and the project name is The Beach. The Beach has been designed by AMArchitectrue, which is a trio of architect, designers, and artists which are based in New York. They are well known, so I'm sure you probably know trio and probably the project. This, the Beach is an interactive installation that plays with the familiar natural and cultural elements of a day at the beach in order to create an unexpected and memorable experience for people of all ages. Visitors take a ramp and then they enter an all-white enclosure where the floor descends towards the highlight of the experience, which is an ocean of over 1 million plastic balls. There's a pier that extends out into this sort of a sea, let's say, which allows people to stand in the center of the space and watch and relate with others. There's an island inviting exploration and discovery, and there are other visual cues such as a desk chairs, lifeguard chairs, umbrellas. These, all these elements actually, they recall the typical elements of a typical beach experience. This project was first installed in 2015 in the National Building Museum in Washington, but then it was a victim of its success and it traveled a lot in several other locations like festivals, museums, shopping malls. The photo here is inside the National Museum, and it's quite strong, these photos. But if you look in the internet and if you look for the other location, you will see, for instance, the installation, the same installation in the shopping mall, which is so strong. In a way, it reminds me Paris Plage, because in Paris there is an event every summer since 2016 or something like that, and basically the municipality of Paris brings a huge quantity of sand in certain spots of the city, like along the Seine River and in the Parc de la Villette. And so you will have this scenario with umbrellas, with people taking baths. This project reminds me Paris Plage, but at the same time, it's not so literal. And there is a very strong contrast with the building that hosts the beach. Of course, we selected certain projects and certain, I mean, when we selected the project, we were thinking at the designers behind. And I have to say that I really like certain projects of architecture, which is why I selected this one. The next one, completely different. You, of course, know Gordon Matta-Clark, and this photo comes from a project, actually a performance, which has been done in Genoa in November 1973, and it was exhibited at the Galleria Format, always in Genoa. When Germano Celant, which is an Italian art critic, were talking about this project in Casabella, he reproduced a poetic text by Gordon Matta-Clark, which was describing his act of cutting with these words: rethinking a building from top to the bottom, end to end, create new stresses, making the right cut somewhere between the supports and collapse. And again, working with buildings without building within the structure between the walls, decapitated rooftops, scored and extracting infrastructure, emphasizing internal structure, through extraction, displacement and alteration, removal at special point of stress, opening spaces to redistribute mass, the ambiguity of place versus object, working with absence. The whole house works to receive an intrusion. I mean, these words are provocation, of course, because it says rethinking a building by cutting it. Cutting not elements, but the entire architectural system. Creating new relationships by cutting with analytical and physical precision. Locating the threshold between support and collapse, and treating it as a site of operation. The thing is that the surgery is not in the architecture, but is on architecture. The artist, mathematical art, tends to rebaptize the architectonic object in the name of an indifferent and non-dogmatic attitude. It carries its finds into the world of art. Architecture finally becomes an indefined, liberated form of expression. And I mean, to me, this project is a pure research of the truth. Is a different way to look at things, to look at the buildings, and to me, it's so honest. This is why to me, it was quite. I have to say that for me, it was quite difficult to associate photos and projects with these four words, but in this case, it was quite, let's say, easy. Okay, the next one is iconic, and this is a famous project by the Italian artist and architect Gaetano Pesce. The building is called the Organic Building, and it has been built in Osaka, Japan in 1989 and completing in 1993. The Organic Building, since the completion, it has become a civic landmark for the city of Osaka, which from that moment on has undertaken its maintenance till today. The exterior of the facade is covered with steel and concrete panels, which are glazed with a red finish that feature rather cute extruding pockets. Inside these containers are fiberglass counters that contain more than 80 types of indigenous plants and trees which were selected in collaboration with Osaka horticulturists. And they are all irrigated via a computer-controlled hydrating system and mechanical pipes. With this project, Gaetano Pesce tries to reinterpret certain elements which are typical of the Japanese tradition, which are bamboo, and you can see the bamboo is sort of actually the pattern that is defined by the red panels underline a certain verticality. So in the void between the panels, there is display with in the imagination of Pesce of the bamboo structure, and also the Japanese garden, because as you know, in Japan there's no space at all, especially in the cities. So the idea was to put the gardens and these elements, these natural elements, in the facade. Today, it's we see greenwashing everywhere now, and I think, and I'm not talking about greenwashing. I don't want to enter I don't want to create a polemic, but Luca, of course, the Bosco Verticale from Boeri, and there are an increasing amount of projects putting green in the facades. But today it's quite it's quite normal. But here we are in 1989, and Pesce attitude was completely different. What can I add? I could add many things, but time flies, so I think I'm gonna move to the next slide, which is the ironic. And this is a photo that comes from a French artist, which is called Riro. And we choose this artist because both Alice and me at ABACO, we really have a sort of obsession for lettering, for all these kind of text messages which are left in public spaces. We really love the narrative behind. We really love we like to call empathy in space, because these words, these messages, which are there often by accident, they create a sort of, they create a narrative in public space, they create an exchange, they create interaction between buildings, between people. And actually we built two projects on this idea, exploring and investigating this idea. And we really like this artist, which is Rero, which you probably know. Rero is a Parisian artist. He is well known for his critical and ethical messages that he leaves in public spaces. And actually, he not only does, he not only uses letters and he uses also other medium like paper and light, and he really works on installation and street art. Oftentimes, he works on abandoned places, and his messages interact with this kind of places. They look for relations with history, with the energy of a place, with the atmosphere, with the texture of the walls created by the accident of life. And I really like, because in his interviews he talks a lot about accidents of life. And I really think also that there's a lot of irony in certain mismatch between the text, the lettering, and the images and the context. And what can I add? I can add that another element of irony is that he uses, for his installation, he uses the font Verdana, which is the one that is one of the fonts which is most recognizable, and which is the one most used by computers. So there is, I mean, there are many levels of ways of looking at its images, its installation. The next one comes from Gianni Pittena. We picked up a project from him, an Italian artist again. Here we are in the 70s. He was teaching in the USA, and at the same time he decided to experiment with the certain with the height house concept, which I love, because I think that this project is the perfect synthesis of all the concepts. You can turn the words in the way you want, but I mean our words, no, we're talking about. You can turn it in the way you want, and this image will always find its place, its right place for me. What to say? Much of his works are considered on the brink between land art and architecture. Here I'm going to show you the Heights house. Actually, there are two versions of it, and that were developed during his teaching in the USA. In the first one, the water flows on an old administration building during Minnesota winter. The building gets covered with a thin ice layer, and new skin, which completely covers the architecture while revealing its form in a more abstract way through a relationship with a natural phenomenon. While the ice house 2, which is this one, is more a suburban house which is covered within a wooden structure on which the water flows. From the outside, the whole building becomes a single ice cube, which is a pure form emerging from the sequence of suburban houses arranged in a row. The landscape is reflected by the new surface of the house, which disappears while suddenly becoming more visible. Yeah, for me, this project is amazing. The idea of mixing the natural phenomenon by by using water, by using the climate in the north of America, by using several elements, playing with them, and creating something so iconic, so ironic, so authentic and fake at the same time. So for me, yeah, it was the perfect fit. This was the last one, and then I'm gonna show you just a quick glance as Luca asked us about the project that we're gonna display in Milan in a couple of months, which is called XVIII Pan Supermarché, and which is a chair, probably. Yeah, it is, as you can imagine, we love Magritte, and this project is, in a way, is the design transposition of one of his famous paintings. This is a chair made of vacuum bricks and straps, and let's say a good dose of irony and allegory. We were thinking, actually, we were wondering if a chair could be an icon of our time. Could the chair be truly meaningful for our culture? If so, if a chair could be meaningful for our time, for our culture, a chair could not be a supermarket. Yeah, we're gonna present this piece with the letters between the philosopher Michel Foucault and the painter René Magritte, which are amazing. And yeah, what can I say about this piece? I can say that probably, again, it can be seen as a critique of the contemporary mass perversion on designing objects. And the Milan Design Week, it's the highest point of this perversion, or it can be a touch and go criticless way to discover the world. It could be seen as a playful and simple upside down stairs becoming a bench. I mean, we like to think that there are many interpretations on this piece. I think the only thing that we can say is that it is made of 230 bricks, vacuum bricks, which are assembled with straps again. And the size is not the focus, of course, as the idea of scale itself is challenged. And the duality of representation, the duality of representation, reality, and the concept of type are also challenged in this piece. Yeah, I think I'm gonna stop here.
Thank you, Alessandro. Thank you very much. We are all very much looking forward to see this in Milano soon. we still have to shape somehow the chair. We are very much intrigued by the fact that it will be mounted on site, I guess, and will be a kind of site specific. And by the way, I thank you quickly also for showing us. I didn't know at all this incredible work of Gaetano Pesce. Jesus, I lost you for a second. I went to Google it, and it's unbelievable. It's an abacus of beauty elements, even the interior. It's crazy word. Thanks for sharing that. And nevertheless, I want to pick out on this last image, since you talked about René Magritte, and since we are going to travel to Belgium soon with Matilde, I want to refer back to your first image you presented, the beach, and telling you a small story. When I was in Belgium, I was astonished. We were in Ostende, and in Italy, we used to go to the seaside and face the sea with the sun on the back, lying on your sun chairs. And in Belgium, it's kind of opposite, because the sun it's on the back and the sea. So everyone is, in Ostend, everyone is giving shoulder to the sea and looking at the sun, which is in the opposite side. I found that probably, if you ask me to pick out an ironic image, to me, that's the one of the best one. So thank you again for that. And Matilde, we go straight forward to you. So Matilde, she describes herself. She's Matilde Everaert, by the way, and Matilde described herself as a freelance architect, an architect who just wants to make a nice atmosphere, whether it is 1, 2, 3, or 4-dimensional, real or fiction. And I can say that we fully subscribe this, and the reason why we invited her is because we are strongly fascinated by that strange, intriguing word which Matildistan is. It's a word made of sharp lines and foggy shadows, fascinating bodies and curious volumes, pale colors and strong ideas. We do believe she's an unbelievable talent, capable to connect hand and brain, and we do believe that her fantasy will soon go wider than Belgian borders. So enjoy, Matilde, and thanks for being with us.
So I will share my screen. And actually, it's quite true about Ostend. It's the Belgian way of doing things opposite that it should be. Wait, that was. I'm almost like, here it is. So, like you already said, I describe myself as an architect who wants to make a nice atmosphere, whether it's 1, 2, 3, or 4-dimensional. And I ask myself if I can be an architect who chooses to design spaces that are not there to be built, but that purely exist as mental spaces, as a drawing or as an installation. And if I do so, what kind of practice do I have then? And I try to project the words fake, authentic, ironic, iconic on my drawing practice. And it wasn't an easy task. Maybe I start overthinking words. I have a thing with words. I'm better with drawing than with words. So for me, every word is like a whole, new kind of thing behind it. But it made my mind wander. So that's probably the most important thing. I choose to only use my own drawings because you never really know the full process behind someone else's drawing. So I just use mine. And for me, the words weren't that easy to separate. They are much stronger together. So I kept them together, but placed them sometimes in another order. So maybe let's start with the fake authentic drawing. It's fake, but still authentic. For me, that's the architectural representation. And often the architectural representation is seen as an inadequate representation of the build or the to be built. When the building is built, the drawing becomes a failed version of the real building. And that's what makes the drawing the waiting room for something beautiful that comes. And to explain this idea, I am gonna show an image that I made for my building practice. So I'm still a building architect, but I'm like balancing between the two, and maybe I will end up more in the drawing section at the end, but for the moment I still build. So we made this image for a project in Ghent. And for me, it's really the fake authentic kind of project because it's made in Rhino. It's a 3-dimensional program. What I really like about those programs is that actually everything is fake. It just exists out of turn on the screen or turn off the screen, it just disappears. But for the clients, I see that it's a real image. For them, it's such a real thing and of how it will look like. And in that way, they didn't see the fakeness of it. So it's quite funny because it's fake, but still authentic. It's also authentic for us because we design it and we make it and we make the image. So in that way, this is kind of the fake authentic. Also, the image loses a lot of power once the building is there, because then everyone's forget about this image, and the clients who are for who we are designing forgetting about this image, and they just start living in the real thing. And then we have the other way around, like the authentic fake drawing. It's authentic, but it's fake. And for me, that's the real architectural drawing. So for those who draw and build, the build version is often the failed representation of the drawing. The drawing is the presentation and not the representation of the dream. So for me, it's often, and that's what I have such a difficult by building, it's often like just the failed version of my drawing, because it's further drawing is because my drawing is really close to me and it's just close to my dream. And when I build it, it disappears and it goes further from me. So I'm having a hard time by like getting it back to myself. So it's authentic, but it's fake. It's very close to myself, but it's fake because I'm not gonna build it. And this I'm gonna this one. So this is a drawing I made for my grandmother. It's like in the summer of 2018 somewhere. We were sitting in her little city garden and she was explaining a house that she had in her dreams. Like it's a very isolated house, it's squared. And we've been talking for a while about a house that only exists in our minds. And when I came home, I was thinking to visualize the house. That's the image that comes from it. So I start using Rhino. I'm also doing printmaking. So I'm studying printmaking. After my architecture studies, I started etching and printmaking. So maybe that's an important thing to know. So that's the point where my printmaking and my architecture start merging. I start using architectural printmaking, architectural programs to make prints. So this is actually made in Rhino, then Photoshop, the classic representation of something. But at the same time, I made it not to build, but to build as a print. So this is a photopolymer print. It's like some kind of copper etch printing. So this is how it appears. And for me, at that time, I realized that actually building a print or making the image going out of the screen, going out of our minds into a print, that was actually my kind of building process. And I liked it a lot more than just building as an architect. So yeah, this is it. And then you have the iconic, ironic drawing. It's iconic, but ironic. In architecture, the most iconic drawings are like plans, sections, details, and it's a way to translate an idea into a building. The drawings are produced to support the design and the production of the building. It's a set of instructions that develops a building, and they tell a lot, are extremely precise, but at the same time, they show so little. That's what I figured out on a journey that I did. I went with from Volvo, like these huge ships from Ghent to Gothenburg. It was an amazing journey, and at the boat, I start writing down the coordinates. Like, yeah, we do that every time because then we exactly know where we are in the sea. So I did it as well at the boat. When I came back, I wanted to show the boats because it was so impressive and so huge that I wanted to show it to the people here at home, like how it looked like. So I started drawing plans and sections and facades like I was taught as an architect. And at that time, I realized that actually those kind of drawings, they didn't show the boat as it wasn't like that. So I felt really loss of information in the drawings that we are taught. For me, it was all the measurements and all, but at the same time, they don't tell you anything at all. If I give you 2 coordinates, okay, you can search for it, you can do the Google Maps, but if you see the coordinate as itself, it doesn't say something. So I start looking at how can I approach sections and plans in a different way. And that brings me to the next step. It's the ironic iconic drawing, because it's ironic because it's not how it should look like, but for me it was iconic because it was a lot more closer to the boat that I discovered, and that became the memory section. So I start drawing on the floor, on my belly, on a huge piece of paper. I start drawing my memories from the boat. And I know that I entered somewhere in the back. There was a huge entrance. I go in, there was a lot of noises. So all the texts that I wrote down, there was like those little extra information. They walked me a bit further in. I got into an elevator and they showed me my room. And I needed to stay there until the boat left the port because it was too dangerous out. But at that time I didn't know. I was somewhere in the boat and I didn't know where I was at all. I don't know what was above me, what was underneath me, where I was somewhere. I had absolutely no idea. And then I slowly started discovering the boat. And for me, this drawing is a lot more the boat that I've been experiencing. It's not like the drawing that I showed before, the real section and the plan, but it's more the combination between sections, plans, perspectives, satellites, all the thoughts that I had on the boat that makes it a better image for it. And then, so this was quite of an iconic moment. It was for my master thesis, this one. So for me, it was like I studied 5 years of architecture. We've been teaching all the plans and the sections. And at the end, like my last project, I was like, okay, but all those plans and sections, it doesn't work for me. There's something more that I need to figure out. So for me, that was kind of an iconic moment. And that was the moment there where I become fully obsessed with architectural drawing and in a lot of ways, also like architectural representation, but also in an analog way, a digital way. It was like a huge world that was opening up at that time. And then I have the authentic, fake, ironic, iconic drawing, which Luca already introduced a bit. And it's the 4 words together is I'm gonna project on a new project I'm doing. It's MATILDE. And currently I'm building like a huge imaginary landscape, city, atmosphere. I don't really know how to call it at the moment. So I just called it MATILDE because it was like a funny thing to call it. Because it's actually a joke from my family a bit, like when I was a kid, because I was always dreaming, and then they also said like, oh, she's lost in MATILDE. And that's the thing that I just like, okay, then we just call this city MATILDE. So it started with hand drawings like this. That's a thing that I'm already doing for quite a while. And when I'm on the train, I just draw and buildings just appears, city arises. And this one I did for a live session in the Beaux-Arts in Brussels. And they just said like, okay, just draw, we're gonna film you, just draw. And I was like, okay, this is quite stressful, I don't know how to do it. But then all the buildings arised, and it felt so, it felt like for me, it was the extremely freedom as an architect. You just can design whatever you want. You don't have a context, you don't have a client, it's just for you, yourself, and you make this kind of huge imagination. But what's the problem with this drawing is that it's limited to the scale of the paper. So that's why I started thinking to go back or like implement the 3-dimensional drawing, because it's a surface, it's a space where you can endlessly add stuff and just draw until you've done, and there is like no limits there. And so I discovered a playground for my architectural non-building desire. And at the same time, it's a playground for my printmaking, because out of this 3-dimensional program, I taking scenes and shots that I can use as a printmaker. And these also influences the city again, because when I make a print, I start dreaming again, and then all the things go further and further. So this is like the first one I did. It's just a building. It was in my folder on my computer. It was like Droomgebouwen. It means like dream buildings. I was like, okay, gonna make a building now, and then I start result printing it, and by mistake I put it in the wrong way, the paper into the result print machine, and then it becomes this kind of weird drawing where sections and plans merges. And yeah, this is the first start of Matildistan. And then I was like, okay, I don't want just one building. I want a lot more buildings. I want a huge city. And then I started also taking frames from it. This one is a copper etch, so it's done on an etching plate, because then it becomes all those line drawings where you start searching for your way to get into it. It's like you see the stairs. It's like very iconic architectural things like stairs and waves and windows and all these recognizable things that you get lost into. So it's really easy to get lost in the two-dimensional space of the drawings, I think. So this one, and then I took some scenes, very dark scenes from the city. I was like, at one time I couldn't sleep, and I was just like, okay, gonna work a bit in Matildistan then. It's nice to be there. So I started drawing these ones, and then I took some scenes out of it, very atmospherical scenes. It's very dark. I did a photopolymer print. It's also in the etching kind of category. So this is kind of the real Matildistan in the night. And then I thought like how, because I realized that my buildings that are arising are very influenced by, about the space that I was in. They are influenced by the trips that I'm doing, by the buildings that I'm seeing, by architecture that I'm seeing, because it's just like unconditional, like in your head, you just have those references. So I was thinking like, okay, maybe I should place a really thin layer on top of some analog pictures. So maybe this you recognize, it's the Giardini in Venice. And I just put it a very thin layer of Matildistan on it. So it's the real building with a thin layer of Matildistan, and they merge really nicely. So at that point, it felt really nice to like getting a bit out of the fakeness, because and merge it with the real building. So I've done this with this one, and then here also with the brick house in London where we visited. Then I also like merged Matildistan with it. And now the idea is to make a whole atlas of the city, like a book, and how it will look like, I don't know yet. It will appear. It's nice that in cartography, it's printmaking was really important. So this, and also for me, architecture is sort of cartography of houses. So I try to make an atlas of it, and we will see where we end with Matildistan. And it's very authentic because it's really close to myself. It's just me as a designer who wants to make a nice house and a nice atmosphere, like I already said. It's fake because it only existed on Rhino and it's or in prints, and it's not there to be built. I never wanted to see it built. And it's ironic because it started from a kind of joke. She's lost in Matildistan, and it's like, for me, this is the real thing. And it's iconic for me as an architect because it's really important to balance myself into the building and non-building practice of architecture. So there we have the four words together, and that's it.
Thank you, Matilde. It was beautiful to listen to you. I think we should really add an extra layer of Matildistan on our entire planet. It's so beautiful. So, and I also think that by coincidence, putting together you and Hadi today, you will be impressed by Hadi's works as well. So it's gonna be something. Thank you also for making us explore, as ignorant personally, to explore this wider range of techniques and to explain a little bit of your process, which is so intriguing. And really check out Matilde's works. You will be surprised by that. So again, thank you very much, Matilde. So we now go to the third of our guests, who is Francesco Zorzi, as a representative, let's say, of NM3 collective.
Yes.
Francesco, looking at you, it's the first time that I have a little bit of nostalgia of Milano. I guess you're in a studio with a typical window, and we see a courtyard on your back. With nice
yes, exactly. I don't know if you see it.
Lovely.
Yes, it seems lovely, but everything is falling apart. It's a good metaphor of Italy, no? It's beautiful.
We know,
but
still
falling apart.
Okay, so
yes, I share my screen. Thanks.
Yeah, I quickly introduce you.
Yeah, sure.
Francesco, NM3, they does interiors, products, and custom furniture. It's a trio represented by Nicolò Ornaghi, Francesco Zorzi, and Delfino Sistolegnani. Apart from the common project NM3, each of the founders run his own activities between teaching and practicing photographies and architecture. Nicolò is member of HubLab. Francesco teaches in Christian Gantenbein studio at the ETH in Zurich, and Delfino Sistolegnani is a marvelous photographer. They are based in Milano, and the reason why we invited them is because we are constantly amazed by the sharpness of every piece of furniture they invent. So pure, so elegant, so precise, and so clever. And nevertheless, we share a certain fetishism for aluminum, galvanized steel, and stones. They will be exhibited soon in the September Super Salone at Alcova Space, but the next year, trust me, I will do my best to catch them before the bell is ringing to be part of FakeAuthentic. So, Francesco, thanks a million for your time.
Thanks.
And enjoy this terrific trio, guys.
Thanks, Luca. Thanks a lot for the nice words. Yes, sharp. They cut for real, though. I mean, I'm bleeding constantly every time I'm moving my piece of furniture.
I'm sure.
Share. So, do you see my screen? Yes.
Yeah, perfectly.
Super. Nice. So, yeah, exactly. So we are NM3, and I'm representing even my two partners, Nicola and Delfino, that today are out of the office because of work, sadly, but I'm happy to be here. So what we thought about, it was kind of actually difficult in a certain point and in certain moment to think about, especially in the ironic section, because yes, well, you will see. But let's start with fake. What for us is a contemporary example, or of like something that can be considered a fake. In this sense, maybe this green corner building of Anne Oltrop. Don't mistake me; it's beautiful fake. It's an extremely formally elegant fake, but yeah, still remains a fake. Remains a fake kind of architecture for me in a way. Just to be clear, I'm talking about myself in this case. I don't know what my partners think about this building. So, well, it's just personal consideration. So, you know, it's trying hard to imitate a natural condition, no? The natural condition of a grotta, the natural condition of a cave, with an extremely high level of human craftsmanship, super expensive, that at the end is this object, boutique-like object, that starts with ambition of being vernacular, in the words of Anne. That is an amazing architect, and is even our neighbor of Christian Gantenbein at the ETH. So we live close at the ETH, we work close in the two offices. And I often have discussion with the assistant of Oltrop about this very theme, and it's really interesting for me, and intriguing, and it still is me like amazed, surprised, but with a lot of doubts, no? And he describes as a new kind of reinterpretation of a vernacular, like local architecture, and still, it's so elegant, it's so fancy, it's so artifact, it's so crafted that how can it be vernacular anymore? It's way much more at the end, the beautiful Maison Margiela-like boutique, always designed by him, no? So yes, a beautiful fake. What is authentic? Speaking about and talking about vernacular, this amazing from the early 70s, Frank Gehry project in Malibu, the famous Ron Davis house, this house and workshop of the artist Ron Davis. And you know, this is really about vernacular somehow. This is brutal and vernacular. This is an amazingly smart, brutal, and cheap, economically cheap takeover on the bow window, typical bow window, American wooden frame, wooden structures, just cladded with this beautiful steel like sheets. And you know, this photo is done by Frank Gehry, and it totally looks like an Ed Rocher Kunstwerk artwork. Iconic. Well, there are many, obviously, that I can quote, but I decided at the end to put this amazing photos and axonometry by Giancarlo Duerich, one of the most famous architects of the book, of the catalog and exhibition, curated by Thomas Bog and Martin Steinmann in 1975 at the ETH in Zurich, talking about the new Ticinese tendenza. So it was called Tendenzen, and Giancarlo Duerich, that is the father of Pia Duerich from the office Duerich and Nolli, for him and his family built this amazing, extremely iconic, square, this cubus in beton. One side the home, one side the atelier. On the edges, as you see here, the stair course, and then just the room. So indifferent, brutal, formally perfect, and really iconic. Ironic. This was tough. I decided for Trix and Robert Hausmann, obviously. It's Trix and Robert Hausmann, Swiss architects with lots of irony. That is not really common, especially nowadays. As you might know, they were even part of the Alchimia collective, together with the early Sozzas, the early Mendini, and Andrea Branzi, and so on. And it's interesting, because in their irony, they remain really always attached to a certain classical way of dealing and of talking and of drawing the architectural form. And here there is a column, just a basic column that is playing, with these pieces that are moving, and they are extremely cultivated designers and architects, and they are obviously referring here to the Ridolfi's formal speculation done in the 30s in Italy. These two towers, one is the restaurant towers and one is a residential tower outside Rome, and it's exactly the same. And obviously Trix and Robert knows this graphical and speculation of Ridolfi, never built architecture of Ridolfi, and they speculate in this sense with irony, but with a sort of historical, deep, consciousness and deep culture. They don't fuck it up, because it's easy to fuck something up using irony, but the using irony still remains consistent, culturally consistent in a way. So for related to our work, I mean, that was even quite tricky, a fake iconic. So I went back in 2019 to find a fake iconic, a possible fake iconic project that we have done. And it's maybe this project that is an installation, a scenography project done for an Adidas Originals, so on the sneakers night jogger launch party. I consider it fake because it's scenography, and in a way we can talk about scenography, and we can describe the scenography as like a discipline, a sub-discipline of architecture that is somehow fake architecture, no? Because it lasts a few hours or a few days and then it disappears, and architecture works completely in the other sense. I mean, the ambition is that your building stays there 500 years, like the Palladio buildings, no? In this case, it was really extreme. No, it's crazy stuff. It lasts like the time of a party. No, it's 8 hours, 8 hours, and it costs like 250K. So it's really absurd in this sense. So it's fake, no? But still, for me, remains. Well, it's maybe strange to say something like this about, my work, but still, there is something iconic, because this was a fence. Let's say it was designed and organized as a fence, to delimitate the dance floor of the party and the stage. And in the night, it was this kind of. There was this kind of feeling. So it was like 5-meter high, super cold neon tubes hanging on these classic, shiny, because it was new, scaffolding structure. And then all the rest of this parking lot was like cladded with scaffolding, like panels, floor panels, just used like walls. And that was, the final result. At the end, I mean, I was searching for something and thinking about something authentic and at the same time ironic, but unfortunately, I mean, if you come in Milano for the Salone, you will discover that we are a deeply ironical guy and funny guy, and we can have a drink together at Barbasso or somewhere in Milano. And but in our work, especially with our furniture, we are really no, we don't really use irony, let's say. And so it's authentic though, because we use like geometrical, obsessively geometrical shapes and just raw material. So it can be considered in a way authentic, but irony, there's not really irony in this, I think. And yes, it's just furniture. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you, Francesco. It was fantastic and sharp, I guess. I thanks for sharing all your production, which is beautiful, and we invite people to go and check it out. And I just want to tell you a small story about, because you mentioned Robert and Trix Hausmann. While we were organizing this series of talks, of course, we talked about them, and we phoned them. We phoned the number you can find on the kind of yellow pages, let's say, or the white pages, the phone address. And Trix Hausmann answered herself with a very, very low voice. I mean, she's more than 90 years old, and she's getting older, let's say. And she replied to me saying that unfortunately they cannot do lectures by Zoom and all these kind of things, since they are not used to do these kind of things. But for me, was listening to her voice was kind of, I told her that talking to her was kind of for a young boy who plays basketball talking with Michael Jordan. I think they are really our Michael Jordan somehow. And thanks for bringing them on the table. And also, thanks for introducing.
Totally.
No, sorry, go.
No, you can meet sometimes. I mean, they go quite often at Kronenhalle, always to have a drink. I met them a couple of times. Available to talk. They're really, really nice, extremely nice.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure, and they do extremely beautiful things, like the Kronenhalle you just mentioned. It's one of the probably the best building in Zurich. And anyway, thank you very much for your contribution, Francesco, and hope to see you very soon in Milano. So last but not least, we conclude with Hadi.
Hope to see you too. Likewise.
Hadi Madwar, with Hadi lives with his body in Montreal, in Canada, and his heart in Syria. Hadi is one of the most incredible talent one could meet, we think. If you don't know him, please check his drawings. I mean, call these drawings, it's kind of reductive. Hadi's creations are pieces of art which stands in a limbo of real, surreal, and hyper-real worlds. We celebrate before Matilde's Matildistan, and we welcome you now to Hadiland. It's not a kitschy Swiss adventure park, but a proper jump in the delicacy and poetic hidden in between tones of thoughts that Hadi's brains invents one by one. Hadi invented his language and his style that is nowadays open to a wider public since he works as an illustrator by his own and by commission, and is capable to transform your sketches in an astonishing paint. Enjoy our beloved Hadi. Thank you.
So that's a very, very generous introduction. I really appreciate that. And thank you so much for organizing this. I normally just share my work through Instagram. So this is a really nice challenge and a great opportunity. So can you see it right now, my screen?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So, so I work as an illustrator. I'm based in Montreal, and I work by commission and sometimes voluntarily. And I've been doing this for about a year. I graduated with a master's in architecture from Indrisio. I worked briefly in packaging design, but right now I really just work as an illustrator. Given that I've been a year into it, it was a really nice exercise, sort of projecting the fake, authentic, ironic, and iconic methodology onto the way I work. It forced me to re-examine what I do and to try to find an answer to that relationship or propose an answer. Yeah. So I work through a dotting technique. I always build my images up dot by dot, and I always use the same pen. It's 0.05 millimeters. It's a lining pen. And I really enjoy the process of building up images. It takes a very long time, but I find it's very rewarding towards the end, and it allows you, the slowness of the process allows you to make changes along the way. I sort of try to look at my work as still life because I'm trying to show life or objects very objectively from a distance. And someone once pointed out to me that in Western languages, there is no actual uniform presentation of what still life is. In German, it's Stillleben, and in French, it's Natur morte. So there's this nuanced understanding of whether or not you're representing life as something very still, or if you're representing a nature which is dead and it sort of just lives through the drawing. I mean, that's its second life. So this is a still life. It was actually a backdrop of a poster that I made, just showing a rose bush, and I think it's at the right resolution to show how I work, to show it dot by dot. Before trying to answer fake, authentic, ironic, and iconic, I'd share a personal reference which I like very much. It's actually one photo series by a Japanese photographer, Kazuma Obara, who wanted to tell the story of Chernobyl through a series of images, and I think he visited the town, and he worked through overexposure to try to tell the story of the site. And I later learned that he actually used film which had a roll of film which had survived the nuclear fallout, and he took his photos using that film. So what are a series of very beautiful photos are actually layered images. And what's so compelling is that it's such a homogeneous image for me, but at the same time, there's a sense of fake because it's actually, he got to use film that had survived Chernobyl, so I think it produces a completely unique result that you can't otherwise produce using just an overexposed shot. And I wouldn't call those layers exactly a fake, but I view them as a fake where there's all these separate layers. And it's been mentioned previously um, in Matilde's presentation that you don't actually know about when you see the final image, or they show up very discreetly, but they completely produce a different effect. And he does this, I think, in a very compelling way, and I was always very inspired by it, how he was also able to use the color white to express light and space. So, which brings me to my first fake. This is a fragment from one of my drawings. It's a fragment of a window and a table with two birds and a mask and an envelope. I call it a fake because I didn't just draw these two elements from a larger drawing from scratch. I actually started with a watercolor to try to bring out the texture of glass, and then slowly went over it with my pen to try to pick up that nuance that water creates with watercolor in the drawing. So in a sense, the drawing becomes a fake because it's actually ripping off the watercolor of its work and of its talent um, and of its qualities. And as I was composing this drawing, it's an iterative process how I do the drawing. Sometimes I'll start very small, and then I just collage in together elements. So this was an early painting of this drawing, and then it evolved into a garden, and then the idea of a window came up through the next drawing, and then the dots started arriving through the tiles. At one point, I decided to change the tiles, and then as the drawing developed, I would paint more of what I could as it developed, and the purpose of using these as a base layer to create the final drawing. Once I had painted the garden, I started to go over it with dots, and I realized I probably wanted to bring a mirror into the drawing, so I started creating the image that I wanted to see in the mirror. So the dots are a way of sort of covering up all these layers, but it's also a way of trying to revisit the process and think about it again in a very, very slow fashion. And then I started zooming in on certain elements that are very small in the final drawing, and then drawing them in detail to make sure that the viewer would see this in the final drawing. Because you're limited in terms of the scale, the size of the dot is limiting in the sense that you can only show so much detail with an image. And the only way around that is to really zoom in. And I only have an A4 sized scanner, so quite often I have to break up elements when I'm drawing them, and I have to stitch them back together on Photoshop. So that's why these words are separated. And then drawing always at completely different scales. Here the side of the door, and then two potted plants, not at the same scale, but trying to get the same level of detail in them. And then here a leftover of the glass part of the wall. Also the detail on the ground so that the water doesn't ruin the walls. And then I was also listening to a French lesson, so I dozed off somewhere, and I started writing conjugations on the side because I was trying to learn them as I was doing this. So this is the final image that comes out. This is the authentic, and it's basically a summation of fakes. And it also presents this, I think, an illusion of being very homogeneous, but in the end, it's a lot of things which have been pastiched together, and sort of the overlaying of the manual dotting technique binds them together. So to hide as much as possible some of the junctions and to present something coherent. So this is a layering technique that I try to bring to all my work. And ultimately, the image is meant to tell a story which was sent to me by a friend, in which he was recounting his memories of his grandfather's house. To me, the most iconic angle you can work with is actually looking 45 degrees at a corner. You're basically just looking at the junction where two corners meet. I think it makes every corner very monumental if you choose to look at it that way, if you choose to represent it that way as well. And always there's this immediate symbolism with the corner, what each corner is looking at. Even if they're looking at the same thing, I think it's still iconic because there's a forced symmetry and it's artificial. But I think it can tell a lot. This image I took out from an illustration competition that I did, which ironically, when I submitted the drawing, the entry was rejected because they wanted images with color, but it was actually a great chance for me because I was able to start my illustration career with this and start selling this drawing. So it was a very happy accident, which led to my my current profession starting. Here is another corner at 45 degrees. I did this for a magazine article which was focused on homesickness and nostalgia that Canadians experience when they travel abroad. I've labeled this drawing as both iconic and ironic because it points out to one of the main challenges of my work when I want to show something in high resolution. I always have to draw it much larger than the original drawing so that when I shrink it down, it gives the illusion of depth, because if you read the dots at the same resolution all the time, it's harder to read depth and you can't really create precision for things shown in the distance. This is actually a fragment of a larger drawing where I wanted to show the reflection of a neighboring building in a mirror. So within the final drawing, it was the most detailed element and the one I had to draw at the largest scale, but ironically, in the very end, it becomes the smallest portion of an image, even though it's most of your investment is just doing that part. At the same time, having to deal with this irony is a great opportunity to decide how to balance your image and what to really focus on, and the rest just becomes staging for that. So as just a general project that I've done where I had to apply all of these lessons into a final image with a very strict timeline, was to do an architectural competition for a Zurich-based office. They were adding an extension to a church in Lörrach, which is on the border with Basel, between Basel and Switzerland. And they were converting this church into a community center and adding an extension. So making the old building right here as a sort of centerpiece in a garden, and then their annex, the community center, would be wrapping around it. And it was a great opportunity to try to use this and to communicate with my studies as an architect to convincingly enough render their project. So this is the exterior view. And this a view of that addition that they would make, wrapping around the church and a garden created in the center. In a sense, there's a layering technique here, and I won't show the layers, but they're actually just Rhino renderings to create light, just to understand a bit where the shadows fall, but using that basis to create the final drawing. The garden itself was just illustrated and added in because it could remain abstract. And this, a final view of the garden. And the good news is that the project won, and they will build it. I think they're doing the construction drawings now, and they've also rendered it more realistically so people understand that it's not an entirely concrete building, because I think the dots somehow, I mean, suggest concrete, but it's not. I think it's a mix of concrete and wood. So in the future, I mean, I'm doing my best to get closer a bit to architecture, but try to use an artistic technique, maybe not necessarily dots in the future, to try to present a non-rendered image to the world of projects, which, as everyone knows, involve a lot of work to create. So yeah, thank you for your time.
Hadi, thank you so much, really. For what my opinion can count, I mean, if you ask me who is a good contemporary artist, I would point you out. It's incredible. I mean, you have nothing to envy to Seurat or Signac, for instance, and as well, I mean, the way you make your fantasy go around, it's kind of Delvaux or Magritte, to come back to what Alessandro was saying before. Attitude, I mean, it's incredible. You project directly us into your own world, and your drawings are so powerful and so beautiful. I think we all share this opinion. It's fantastic, just fantastic. So thank you for spending your time with us, and thank you all, guys. Thank you, Matilde, Alessandro, Francesco, for having a long lunch break. And now we formally break, introducing you to the next talk, which is going to happen on this Wednesday. We will have Comte Meuli from Switzerland, and then Eugenio Tiella, who was not present last week. He will recover this week, let's say. And then Charles Holland from the UK, and who am I forgetting? And Marco Cappelletti, of course, from Italy. So we thank you again for the attention, and we wish you a nice lunch, and looking forward to see you soon, guys. Thanks.
Oh, thanks a lot. Ciao,
Ciao.
ciao.
Hello, guys.
Ciao.
Nice to meet you.